This is the most important election of our times.
Most important election of our lifetime.
We will re-elect our president.
All on the line.
Get people registered.
Cast your promise. Cast your vote.
Cast your vote.
We must vote.
For months, the powers that be have been urging Americans to vote. And the public, which has been programmed since childhood to believe this is how they exercise their freedom, power, and responsibility, has faithfully obeyed, patting themselves on the back for doing their part to save America from, wait, what and who exactly are they voting to challenge? Trump and Republicans, Biden and Democrats, right-wing nutjobs, libtards and commies, dangerous gun nuts, dangerous gun grabbers, capitalism, socialism, Russia, China, the Koch brothers, George Soros, selfish non-voters, the globalists, nationalism, Iran, hatred, and obviously, the Jews. Voters blame everyone, of course, but the institutions driving these dire problems and those voters who are casting votes for their same political team, all of them believing they're taking righteous action against evil. But if your vote is your voice, and we are the government, as the talking heads and political class keep insisting, voters have no one to blame but themselves. You may vote when the masters allow and urge you to, but for decades, if not longer, millions of Americans have spent their lives ignoring what the politicians they elect actually do. I get it. You were content, sedated by public school obedience training, federally subsidized brain-rotting food, and FDA-approved hard drugs. You were guzzling down state-worshipping infotainment and CIA and Pentagon-influenced propaganda that taught you not only to be terrified, but also to trust the government and politicians to care for you and keep you safe, all the while voting for oligarchy and corporatism. But as you've slumbered in your cocoon, ignoring and justifying the sins of your preferred party and politicians, they've colluded with your perceived partisan enemies, creating the festering pustule you think voting will purge. You may convince yourself your lesser evil vote is necessary, noble even, and certainly pragmatic. Yet what of these lesser evil votes, your voice, according to popular mythology, actually achieved? An imperial warfare state, justified by lies and fear-mongering that routinely kills civilians while also arming and funding violent extremists, producing more terrorists and asylum seekers with both policies. No, Trump isn't anti-war, he's armed the Saudi warmongers who he accused of doing 9/11 and has set records for bombs dropped and civilians killed. A mass surveillance apparatus, one Biden helped create by writing the foundations of the Patriot Act, and one Congress has helped continue with Trump signing off multiple times. Crippling debt that will be passed off to future generations with a central banking system crafted by bankers that orchestrates wealth transfers, the devaluation of currency, and inflation, all of which disproportionately affect the poor and working class and concentrate the elite's power. A ramped-up police state, a corporate ruling class that knows nothing will fundamentally change no matter who wins, cages and deportations, a drug war that drives authoritarianism and police overreach, and like U.S. foreign policy creates refugees, and a war on the free press and whistleblowers, to name a few. Trump protects our gun rights, libtard, by confiscating them without due process.
Take the guns first, go through due process second.
And supporting the expansion of power for police, who will be the ones to take your guns, whether under him or a Democrat. But Biden will save the environment. Doing what? Continuing the bipartisan empire via the Department of Defense, which is one of the biggest polluters in the world. And after serving in the administration that okayed the Dakota Access Pipeline, Trump is fighting radical Islam by arming one of its biggest and most repressive supporters. Biden's gonna stop systemic racism after literally writing racist policies harsher than Ronald Reagan's. And with a VP who threw minorities in jail and ruined their lives over a plant, Trump saved the economy and he'll destroy socialism by worsening the deficit and increasing the debt by trillions and encouraging the Fed's inflationary policies, just like Biden undoubtedly will, while restricting free trade and bailing out corporate welfare recipients. If voting for lesser evils or anyone at all prevented evil, the stakes wouldn't get higher every single time. You wouldn't keep ending up with evil and having to rationalize it to so-called save your democracy or republic. Except you are not your government, but you believe you are because it's all we've ever been taught. That we must give some people authority we ourselves do not have, like the right to steal and kill, sending men with guns to do our bidding for things we wouldn't ever violently enforce ourselves, whether to commit war crimes while serving powerful interests, send American citizens to internment camps, uphold and enforce segregation, confiscate guns, steal property without charge or trial, or cage people for possessing banned substances or crossing an imaginary line determined by the ruling class. You are not the government, but thanks to years of indoctrination, you believe in the righteousness of using government violence to control your fellow humans, calling it the will of the people. A euphemism that actually means the tyranny of majority rule, where a majority of the population that votes can lord over the rest in a system established by a tiny minority who never obtained consent from the people they claimed authority over. The system that got you here, to the alleged
most important election in the history of our country,
where you can't even vote out many of the most insidious actors, the private bankers who control the political and financial systems, the revolving door lobbyists who plague both parties and numerous agencies, the liars, hacks, election meddlers, and infiltrators at the CIA and FBI. This system has led to the the wholesale destruction of human decency as people are pitted against each other under threat of state coercion and violence and forced to pay for programs they find morally abominable. As Lysander Spooner, the 19th century abolitionist you'll never learn about in public school, observed, in short, the individual finds himself, without his consent, so situated that if he use the ballot he may become a master. If he does not use it, he must become a slave. And therein lies the common denominator. The force of government and the delusional faith in authority and the right to choose masters for others as the partisan pendulum swings back and forth. I get it, you'd rather do nothing. It is a sad statement on people's own sense of personal agency and identification with this violent institution that many equate not punching a hole or tapping a screen to doing nothing. If you took the time and energy you spend being angry and blaming your perceived political enemies, and the money you spend funding oppressive policies you rationalize so you can feel you did something, and devoted it instead to engaging in actual compassionate action, not outsourcing it to the government, directly supporting your communities, mutual aid groups, and non-government organizations doing work you value, if you opted out of the state corporate media propaganda apparatus and supported credible independent media, started using social platforms that don't censor people, violate your privacy, and collaborate with government spies, if you engaged in nullifying unjust, victimless crime laws while serving on juries, adopted alternative currencies to undermine the Fed's monopoly, worked toward independence from heavily subsidized agriculture, took responsibility for your own safety and self-defense, opted out of state-sanctioned big pharma by taking care of your health and supporting less harmful alternatives when possible, cared for your mental and emotional health so you're less easily manipulated and reactive, and ultimately questioned the entire premise of a violent political authority instead of viewing it as a force to control, and actively disobeyed their dictates, the stakes wouldn't be so high. The fears of American voters are not unfounded, and it's understandable why so many good people believe they have no choice but to vote for authoritarians who actively violate the very document that establishes their beloved elections. But the reality is that without the institution of government and its ability to coerce compliance, threats like racism and white nationalism, socialism, and communism would be exponentially lower, because hateful, violent, and even well-meaning but incompetent people wouldn't be able to literally force their views on others. And by far, the most severe inhumanity in history has been committed by governments or profiteers acting with permission from the crown. It's never too late to undermine and break away from the destructive power of this institution and its propaganda. But as long as you keep turning to corrupt authoritarians and people who crave power, even with the best of intentions, you will remain stuck in the ever-increasing evil feedback loop and the crippling anger and fear that come from this ritualistic power struggle every 4 years. Until then, congratulations, America. You played yourselves.